Hey Chargers! Today we're going to be talking about function notation. And function notation is just another way that we can write our equations. So if you have an equation written as this, y equals negative 3x plus 1, then you could also write it in function notation. And when we write it in function notation, we simply replace the y with f of x, which is this right here. So instead of saying y equals, we'll say f of x equals. The f of x completely replaces the y, and that's how we read it. We say f of x. It's a function that we have named f. That's what the letter f is. It's not a variable. It is the name of the function, and it's a function of the independent variable x. So we're looking at what happens to our function when we have an x value that we're doing those operations to. So in this case, we're doing negative 3 times our x value plus 1. F is just one of the names that we can use. We can use any number of letters for naming our functions. We can use G, we can use H. Those are the three most common ones that we're going to be seeing. So let's look at our first example here. We're talking about the function w of x, which equals 250 times x. And that represents the number of words, w of x, that you can read in x number of minutes. So we want to know how many words we can read in 8 minutes. So we're going to use our function w of x is equal to 250 times x. And x is representing our number of words that we can, or x is representing the number of minutes, sorry. X is representing the number of minutes. W of x, this function is telling us how many words we can read in however many minutes we're looking at for our x value. So this is specifically asking us how many words we can read in 8 minutes. So that's going to be our x value that we're going to use. We're going to use x is equal to 8. And we're going to plug that in where we have x in our equation. So now our way of writing it, instead of saying w of x, we're going to say w of 8, because we actually have an x value that we're plugging in. And this only tells us, the reason why we write the 8 in here, just tells us what we're evaluating our function at. What number are we plugging in for x? That's all it's telling us on this side. That is not another variable. It's just telling us that that's what we're plugging in for our variable. So we're going to do 250 times the 8 that we're plugging in for the x. So when we plug that into our equation and multiply it out, we'll find out that w of 8 is equal to 2,000 words that we could read. So in 8 minutes, we can read 2,000 words. And that's simply what this is saying. This is telling us that when we plug in an 8 for our x value, so we're talking about 8 minutes, then we will end up reading 2,000 words. So this sentence, or this equation, simply is telling us that in 8 minutes you can read 2,000 words. Now over here on the right side, if you notice, this is how you have seen this done before. You've seen it done with the y, and you've plugged in the 8 for the x, and you found y was equal to 2,000. It is the exact same thing. The only difference is we're using a new type of notation for it. We're using our function notation. So now let's look at example 2. We are given the function f, so f of x, our function f of the value of the independent variable x, is equal to 6 times parentheses 1 minus x close parentheses. And it wants to know what the value of f of negative 8 is. So this right here is simply telling us that our x value is going to be equal to negative 8. Notice how in this notation that negative 8 has taken the place of where the x was in our original equation. So we're going to write f of, well, I'm going to write the equation first. So f of x is equal to 6 parentheses 1 minus x. Now I'm going to rewrite it, and I'm going to plug in my 8. So now I'm talking about f of negative 8. Again, this is simply telling me that I'm just replacing my x value with the number negative 8. So I'm going to say 6 times 1 minus negative 8. And of course, minus negative 8 is going to be plus 8. So we have 6 times 1 plus 8, because minus a negative changes it to plus. F of negative 8 is equal to 6 times 9, and 6 times 9 is equal to 54. So this is telling us that when we have an x value of -8, when we plug it into this function that we've been given, we end up with the number 54. So if our independent variable is replaced with the number -8, then our dependent variable becomes 54.